Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, the Euretina webinar on age-related macular degeneration and AI. Of course, this is an extremely exciting topic, and I'm very fortunate to moderate together with Professor Marion Munk from Switzerland this very exciting discussion that are going to follow. We are fortunate to be joined by excellent speakers. So Professor Monk who is a world-known retina and uveitis specialist and also a reading center creator and leader, which will be followed by Professor Tunde Peto from Queen's University in Belfast. This will be followed by a talk from Ursula Schmidt-Erfurth, who is a well-known professor from Vienna. And our final talk will be from Professor Konstantinos Balaskas, who is the head of Reading Center at Moorfields and professor of ophthalmology at UCL. So without further ado, I will hand over to Professor Marion Munk, who will start the first talk on translation of AI-based algorithm in clinical practice. Marion?
Thank you so much, Anat, for the amazing and kind introduction. And of course, you didn't introduce yourself, so I have to introduce you. So I think everybody knows you. You're the professor and the leading retina expert here who is kind of leading the session. And thank you very much for the kind invitation that I'm able and capable of talking here today. So I will start about talking a little bit about the translation of AI-based algorithm in clinical practice and what are the hurdles. So what is the reason why we are not having tremendous amounts of different AI algorithms in our clinic yet? So these are my financial disclosures. None of them are relevant to this talk. So as you can see from this graph, actually, there was an artificial intelligence explosion. So when you look back to 1996, for example, we had one publication where artificial intelligence was used, and also in the heading and in the title, where nowadays there are tremendous numbers of scientific articles on artificial intelligence. And this is not only true for all kind of disciplines, it's also especially true for the ophthalmology sector. So when you put in PubMed ophthalmology and artificial intelligence, you see that over 22,700 articles pop up. And you can also see from the graph below that there was a tremendous increase in the numbers of publications in this field. And also when we look at the investment side, so for example, when we only look at the European Union, they, for example, spent over 1.5 billion they put into AI research through 2020. And the country France itself also put over 1.5 billion to AI research through 2022. So you see there's also a lot of money going into this field, and this always kind of enhances and improves the development. When we look on the FDE clearance, so kind of algorithms or machine learning and AI enabling algorithms and devices which were cleared by the FDA, meaning that they can be used in clinic in the USA, you see also that there's tremendous and a quite large number of these kind of devices and algorithms which have been already approved and cleared. And also in the ophthalmology space, there are several algorithms which are available nowadays and are cleared. You can see here, for example, the IDXDR, which can be used for screening of diabetic retinopathy, INUC from iArt, which was previously approved for AMD and is now has also just recently received the clearance for diabetic retinopathy screening. But also a lot of different devices actually have AI and machine learning enabling algorithms inside of their algorithms and of their software and are used. And all of these software versions have to be cleared and approved by the regulatories. For the US, it's of course the FDA. For the European Union, so in Europe, it's the EMA who is doing this. And usually here you need a CE mark. So when you, in order to get the the algorithm is approved so everyone can use it in clinic. And we will hear about this a little bit later, but usually the FDA is more strict and has more strict guidelines what can be approved and what not, compared to the EMA. And this is also why in the EU we have more kind of CE marked algorithms nowadays than when compared to the US. So, but what are the reasons when we look at the high numbers of academic articles which have been published and which are still being published, but there's only a limited number of approved algorithms which are available for clinic? What is the reason for that? So the reason for that is first the data. And so the data quality and the data quantity. And I will go into detail a little bit here. So depending on which algorithm you use or which machine learning technique you use, you need more or less data. And the more advanced a machine learning algorithm is, the more data you need. In the ophthalmology space, usually the number of available data and images are rather limited. And so usually we are working with labeled data, meaning that we have someone, an expert, who is labeling the data. And based on this, the algorithm is trained, and then it can be tested and used and applied on new images. Here, of course, the target variable is known, otherwise you can't label it. And the goal is here to predict new and unseen data. The other way is unsupervised learning, which is not so commonly used in the ophthalmology space, where you need a high number of data and a high numbers of images. And here it is that you do not have to label the data, and the target variable is actually not known. So one of the examples are, for example, the very famous article which was published in Nature, where they kind of predicted age and gender just based on color fundus images. And like I said, in the ophthalmology space, mainly labeled data are used. So how does this work usually? So usually, like I said, in the ophthalmology space, the numbers of data are rather small. So we are mainly working with supervised data and usually labeled data. So for example, this is a very easy algorithm I show you right here. This algorithm is trained to, for example, differentiate pictures from a dog with a picture from a swab. And it would be similar to kind of differentiate diabetic retinopathy from no diabetic retinopathy. And of course, you have an expert who tells you every time this picture shows a dog and this picture shows a swab. This information is then extracted and the machine learning algorithm is then trained. And based on that, the machine algorithm can be used to predict new images. In case of this, the algorithm is shown a picture with a dog, and then if the algorithm is accurately trained, he will say, this is a dog. However, like I said, the prediction accuracy always depends directly on the quantity and quality of the annotated data used. And if you have, for example, an algorithm which is not so accurately trained, you may end up when you have a picture like this, which is a little bit harder, and you ask the algorithm again, is this a dog or a swab? And it's not accurately trained. Actually, the algorithm will turn out and say, no, that's a swab and not a dog. So, but how many pictures are really needed to train an algorithm appropriately? Again, this depends on the question and on the algorithm you use. Usually, like I said, a quite easy algorithm where you just differentiate between referable and non-referable diabetic retinopathy, which means the algorithm decides whether it's no diabetic retinopathy or mild diabetic retinopathy versus moderate, severe, non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy or proliferative diabetic retinopathy. You need usually 50 to 60,000 images to train the algorithm accurately. So, and if you kind of remember all the academic papers, mine of course included, yeah, you see the numbers of these training data sets are much lower usually. What about the quality? So usually the quality, the top quality can be reached. It does not mean that the data quality or the images have been like perfectly fine. It rather means that the expert annotation is really accurate and good. And the way you reach this is that you do not use only one grader or one expert who tells you that this is present or absent, but rather several graders. And then you choose based on a majority vote really the result. And from large studies, we have seen that 4.5 graders are kind of needed to really reach the maximum performance possible of an algorithm. Beyond 4.5 graders, really the quality does not really improve a lot more. So for example, this is one example of an algorithm Google developed similar to the IDXDR algorithm to differentiate non-mild, moderate, and severe diabetic retinopathy and proliferative diabetic retinopathy. And for example, here, this algorithm used 125,000 images. So this was an accurately trained algorithm. And here, this was about the quantity. And in terms of quality, each image was kind of looked at by 3 to 7 ophthalmologists out of a group of 57 ophthalmologists. So you had like 3 to 7 ophthalmologists who looked at each picture and decided what kind of diabetic retinopathy severity stage it is. And this algorithm was then tested on 12,000 images. And whether the results were correct or not, this was kind of decided by 7 to 8 US board certified ophthalmologists. So you already see that in order to really build an accurate algorithm with a high accuracy, which also performs very well on data sets which has been never seen by the algorithm, really needs a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of data, and then of course a lot of money. And I've previously said that this was just recently submitted or kind of released by the FDA. It's a recommendation plan for companies who want to submit their artificial intelligence and machine learning enabled device software versions to the FDA for FDA clearance. And what is very important here is that the FDA has decided that the testing of the algorithm must be done by an independent data set. What does this mean? Actually, it means that the company or you, whenever you want to bring an algorithm to the market, you have to perform a prospective study and kind of collect prospective data, because otherwise the agency has kind of stated that you cannot be sure that the algorithm has seen some of the pictures. And of course, this makes this more time consuming and also more expensive. So for example, this was also done by the IDXDR, and the IDXDR was tested on 900 subjects of 10 different sites and centers. This was also a prospective study where they collected these data prospectively. But then you already have the FDA clearance, but this doesn't mean that you get a billing code. So in order to get reimbursed and to get money back, that when you use the screening tool, you have to apply for a billing code as well, which then needs another several steps. By the EMA is not so far to and has not yet released any strict guidelines. The latest manuscript they have kind of provided was published 2021, and it's rather a document and a manuscript on risk definition, how to minimize risk and how to kind of inhibit or prevent harm. And based on this, also the EMA and the EU is much less strict on this. So they also allow algorithm to be tested on a retrospective data set. And this is also, like I said, that many more algorithms, especially screening tools, are available in the EU and are kind of have this E-marked when compared to the US. However, so far, there is no billing code for the EU, which means that some countries reimburse telemedicine or screening tools, but most of the countries do not. So we talked now how many data are necessary and how the quality of these data must be, that the accuracy of the of the algorithm can be achieved. And the question is always what the overall accuracy must be that an algorithm gets approved by the regulators. And so far, and this gold standard has been also set by the IDXDR, is a sensitivity of 0.85 and a specificity of 0.825. And again, it must be tested, and this sensitivity and specificity must be reached on an independent prospective data set. The second hurdle is definitely the cost. First, the cost to develop it, and on the other hand, the cost, of course, who will pay for it. And when we look at that is that interestingly, we assume that when we have a fully automated screening algorithm, that this is of course much cheaper than when each individual patient comes in to an ophthalmology clinic to get screening. However, this is unfortunately not true. And so far, the most cost-efficient model is still a hybrid model, where you have a screening, an AI-based screening tool, and then the result, in case it's positive, is kind of checked by another human who is looking at the image as well. The reason for this is that the specificity compared to the sensitivity is lower, which means that you get a lot of false positive cases, which means that a lot of people go to the ophthalmologist but actually do not have anything or have a cataract or something else. So this is the reason why the hybrid model is still more cost efficient than the AI model alone. Again, the other point, of course, is the reimbursement. So like I said, in the EU, we do not have general billing codes like the US. And so far, this is not homogeneously used. And so in many countries, AI algorithms, especially the ones you're using in clinic, are not reimbursed. And this was, for example, a very, very interesting study which was performed in Germany. They used the IDXDR telemedical screening tool in a primary healthcare setting. And what is very interesting that based on the screening tool, the referrals to ophthalmologists increased by 72% in terms of diabetic retinopathy. I think this is something we have to learn here, because a lot of our colleagues are afraid that the AI will kind of take over their jobs, but rather the opposite is true. Actually, more patients are seen by ophthalmologists because of this screening. However, when you asked the patients whether they're willing to pay, only 32% of the screened are willing to pay for the service. Of course, because they're used to get healthcare for free when they just go to the ophthalmologist. And so here we see already the problem. Nobody's willing to pay for it. And so far, the health insurances are not doing it. So because of the fact that we are not reimbursed when we use these kind of tools in clinic, another question is, may it be efficient also in terms of costs, because we are faster and we make more accurate decisions. This is currently tested by the so-called Razorbill trial, which was a prospective trial, which was initiated by Novartis. And they're really testing whether an AI-based model and algorithm really enhances and improves the decision-making and also makes an ophthalmologist faster. However, this study is still ongoing, so I can't tell you the results right now, but hopefully we will see them, I think at AVO. At AVO next year or at AAO already. Another problem is the integratability in clinic and the individual demands. Of course, everybody has different devices, so we have to make sure that the algorithms are all appropriately trained on all different devices we use. We have to make sure that the algorithms are integratable in our electronic record forms. And of course, usually it should not make the workflow worse. So usually it should kind of improve the workflow, which is actually currently, when you try it, most often not the truth. And then, of course, sometimes because it's in real time, it's time consuming to wait until the automated algorithm and the segmentation has taken place. But nonetheless, the good thing is that it is coming, and we still have several examples in clinic. So there are several cloud-based solutions, also plugins if you do not want to kind of upload your images on the cloud. And also Heidelberg has kind of a very interesting offer where they offer different AI-based algorithms on their platform, and you can just upload the images or their images individually. One interesting example is also nodal vision, and of course also Anat was very much involved in the development of this device and of this algorithm, which is an inbuilt home office OCT, and this is currently also tested in a prospective trial which was initiated by Bayer. So with that, you see a lot of hurdles, but nonetheless, AI will definitely make its way into our clinic, and this already has kind of started to be used in our clinic. And always great revolutions need some time until they can take over completely. With that, thank you for attention, and I'm looking forward to further discussions later on. All right, with the next one, I would love to introduce Tunde. She will now talk about AI and AMD and really actually show what we can do with the AI algorithm. So she won't talk about the negative parts, but rather about the positive parts here. Take it away, Tunde.
Thank you very much. I can still only see your slides, so I'm sure technical help will be coming. Thank you very much. So it's lovely to see you all here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why we also need to be thinking very differently about what we are going to be able to achieve when AI comes. So we do know from this very large work that was done for the Lancet Global Health Commission that eye health contributes significantly to sustainable development goals, and it has a vast impact on society. But also, if we look at the interrelationship between the vision impairment and general health, you will be able to see that that there are quite a number of issues that are influenced by our ability to be able to see and to be able to engage with our social environment, to be able to exercise, and it will help us not to be depressed. Dementia will be fought off, and our cardiovascular and cancer risks will drop. So it's important that we think about the eye diseases in the entirety of the population. And this is the other reason why we need to think about it, because ophthalmology is currently the busiest subspecialty, not just in the UK, but I'm sure lots of other countries as well. And about 10% of all hospital appointments are to ophthalmology. So it does matter how we organize ourselves, because otherwise we will not be able to provide the amount of people that we need to see with good service. Even high-income countries struggle with providing the level of care that is needed. And imaging and image analysis can definitely help with service provision as well. And also we will be able to provide the much needed help and service improvement to those countries that, as you can see on the very bottom, for example, Africa or Southeast Asia, where in proportion to the population, there are very few ophthalmologists. But a lot of these countries now are getting better and better in camera use, and they are able to take pictures of the back of the eye. So the AMD is a real issue now. People have, we have a lot of people with age-related macular degeneration. At the moment, most countries are treating the neovascular AMD, but the geographic atrophy treatments are coming, and that will make our clinics even busier. So a lot of these people will require screening for the disease, monitoring, and some will require treatment. And you will see that between baseline and 9 years later on this picture, one of my patients, you can see that the drusen gets more and more and more numerous. Both at baseline at 7 years, the patient has 6/6 vision, and only 9 years later, the vision starts being lost due to geographic atrophy. So the issue is that this patient will have been seen several times in this 7-year period, and how could we have done better? And Marion has alluded to some of these strategies, but we are going to discuss some more. So we have been working very closely with Tel Aviv to look at how we can look at the images that we have for AMD and how we might be able to use them better. So if you think about it, we take a lot of images for each eye. This is then interpreted by either retina specialist or in the UK, a lot of the time by highly trained optometrists or nurses. The decision making is based also on comparison between images. And I think this is a very important point, that we lose a lot of the opportunity for gaining time when we then have to go back and compare, because we just get a point of care or point in time grade from the AI. So it is all very time consuming. And also if we look at this, depending on the AMD and the severity of the changes, a patient might visit the hospital for weekly or might not be treated. And about 76% of all of our patients arrive with at least one accompanying person. So we're taking a lot out of the economy and the patient's social care. So the British Israeli project for AMD, we've been looking at how we can implement some of these deep learning tools into clinical research. And by creating a comprehensive data set, including structured clinical and unstructured, such as OCT images data, and including the heterogenic cohort from the two populations and treat according to the country's regulations. So you can see how this cohort would really resonate with all of those issues that Marion has been speaking about, and how we can develop AI models for helping to manage an AMD. So we had, over 10,000 visits in Israel and close to 100,000 visits here in Belfast. And you can see how many eyes and patients. But we have really needed to think about how we will be securing the data set, how we will be grading, and that the data set for fluid. And this is where, again, Nota Vision came in. And we've been working very closely with them and their algorithm. But then you realize that in this team, you really need to have data scientists, data analysts. You need to have all of those people who are able to extract and analyze these data. So it's not enough just to have a software that will do one patient, which is great for one clinic. But if you want to understand on a population level, on your population level, you need to be working with your mathematicians as well. So both in the UK and in Israel, we figured out that our patients behave the way that we expected, which is great. Unfortunately, as time goes on, their vision gets slightly worse, and that's just the disease process. And this is the Israeli data. Their patients were getting slightly better, although for 3 years everyone nearly hung on to their vision, which is great. It's nice to know that you're doing a great job for your patients. So when we're thinking about this, if we harvested the data, we really had to find the technical infrastructure, the AI tools that are able to do this. What do we really want to achieve? And what is it that would be helpful for us all? And things like, how do we think about our patients? The first patient on the left-hand side had 9 injections, had good response and no fluid and very good visual acuity, as shown on the top and the bottom panel. But the second patient started exactly from the same place and had 25 injections and poor response. So analyzing both the data and the images will give us a lot more understanding as to why patients react differently to the same drug and what might be different in their makeup and AMD, just to be able for us to treat it. So just to some basic initial data, we looked at a lot of the retinal measurements, but again, you get a lot of measurements, 76 measurements in total at baseline and 6 months only, and then developed the prediction models. And the prediction models are working really pretty well now as to how many injections the patients will require in the first, second, and the third years of treatment. As you can see, it starts dropping because it's really struggling sometimes with the third year. So what we need to do is make sure that we can add more data to it, as again Marion has been talking about. And I know that Konstantinos will talk more about it, but we really need to be thinking as to where we're going to use the AI, and what are your options, and what is it that you and the health system will be allowing you to be able to do. And just for those who really worried about some of us, being redundant, I don't think we will be. And so there is a lot of value in reanalyzing some of the data sets that we have as well, because there's nothing like that humans with prior knowledge thinking about what grading the features, what features there might be, what do you want to teach to the algorithm and what you want the algorithm to notice. And then if you come up with new ideas, then of course once you run it, then you will be able to see which characteristics will help you with the most with the survival probability of getting neovascular AMD. And this is the paper that Marion has alluded to again. This is the Google algorithm that predicted your age, your gender, and your blood pressure. So that's really important, and sometimes a bit frightening as to what they're seeing that we are not seeing. So we really just want to make sure that our projects are improving the physician's decision-making and rethink treatment algorithm based on quantitative measures, and AI can really help us there, and build models that incorporate all the data and or the risk assessment, and to make sure that we can predict how many appointments we need, what personnel we need, and predict as to what our patients might be able to see at the end of their treatment period. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Tunde, for this super interesting presentation. I think we will move on to the next talk, and we will have our discussion in the end. So the next talk will be given by Professor Ursula Schmidt-Erfurth. Unfortunately, she can't be here in person today, but she was so kind and recorded her presentation. So we are able to hear her right now. So I would like to ask the tech team to kind of show us the presentation. Thank you.
My name is Ursula Schmidt-Erfurth from the Department of Ophthalmology in Vienna, and it is my pleasure to talk to you about the effect of AI on treatment and prognosis. Fancy AI-based tools can do very fancy things. I show you here the network architecture of counterfactual guns that we used in the study on 85,000 images of healthy adults to make retinas on an individual level age or become younger. So this is in healthy disease where there are little features of disease present, a very distinguished task. In disease, it is all about understanding disease activity, and I would like to draw your attention. In geographic atrophy, the site of disease activity has to be uncovered underneath the OCT, as the auras consist of photoreceptor degeneration, seen in green, and retinal epithelium loss, red. To identify those features, we created deep learning-based algorithm, one for RPE segmentation, which is based on a 3D to 2D en face semantic segmentation. That means that it extracts the RPE layer from the full 3D volumetric image. Precise. The same level of precision can be reached when segmenting the photoreceptor layer, which is identical with the EZ line. We used an ensemble of 4 different networks to be able to extract a photoreceptor thickness map, as shown here, with the loss of photoreceptors in dark and the photoreceptor layer with all its irregularities in green. These tools can allow us to visualize disease progression, and what you can see in every single case is that photoreceptor degeneration, as seen in green, always exceeds and precedes consecutive RPE loss. This is a point of understanding, as it allows us to predict fast progressors and identify low progressors. A lesion like the one on the left side has a very low ratio of RPE and photoreceptor loss, while on the right side there is a very high ratio of photoreceptor versus RPE degeneration. That means that this lesion will very likely continue to grow fast. We confirmed this hypothesis on the phase 3 data of the Apellis trial, Oaks and Derby. You can clearly see that the continued line, which represents the higher tertile of the photoreceptor RPE ratio, has a much faster progression as compared to the dotted line, which is the group with the low. So is this photoreceptor ratio and the photoreceptor representation real and relevant? Yes, we did a point-to-point correlation with microperimetry and could clearly show that retinal sensitivity correlates in a consistent and linear fashion with photoreceptors. So AI helps us significantly to understand disease activity. It provides accuracy in subclinical feature detection. It allows an understanding of how disease activity works, and it provides parameters that can make predictions. And this is the same tools can be used then to monitor therapeutic. As seen here in the Oak study, the gray line represents the sham progression of the lesions. On the left side for photoreceptors, on the right side for RPE. The blue line is bi-monthly, the red line is monthly treatment. There is a consistent inhibition of photoreceptor degeneration and also of RPE loss. You can see that the effect on the photoreceptor level is much larger. So yes, therapeutic AI allows us to monitor a therapeutic effect, not only precisely, but also in the right compartment. And that was confirmed also in this study. Let me give you an example that visualizes that effect in one patient where the fellow eye is seen to the left and the study eye to the right, while in the untreated eye, photoreceptor degeneration RPE loss continued to a complete wipe out of the treated eye. Based on this photoreceptor RPE ratio, we could also predict the therapeutic effect. On the left, the lowest tertile for all of the groups. On the right side, you see that the highest tertile has by far the best therapeutic effect, while in the sham arm, which is seen in red, there is relentless progression. The treatment arms remain very low. So, a very important. And this can now be seen by a mouse click on any regular OCT. On this report by Retinal, which is an app on the Heidelberg Spectralis instrument, you see on the lower image how the segmentation worked. This is your quality control. You can see in the middle row on the left the RPE damage. This is what you would see on FAF. What you would not see on FAF is the middle image representing the photoreceptor degeneration area, and then the overlay showing you the photoreceptor RPE ratio, which allows you to make a clear prediction about the progression of this lesion and also about the therapeutic success. And in the upper row, this comes with very precise numbers, precise on the single pixel. For monitoring therapeutic response, which will be of utmost importance in GA, which is a disease with a very high variability where patients will not experience improvement. It is important to monitor very precisely, and AI can bring this to the level of OCT, where the most pronounced effect of complement inhibition is seen at the level of the photoreceptors. That has been supported by comparison with the untreated fellow eye, and the role of the photoreceptor RPE loss ratio also being confirmed. So much about GA. Let's focus on neovascular AMD. In neovascular AMD, the biomarker that guides treatment. As for GA, OCT must uncover the different fluid compartments. Fluid compartments matter because it is intraretinal fluid that, if its quantity increases, this is the dark line, comes with lower and progressively more loss of vision. So intraretinal fluid must be measured very. Why is this so? Because intraretinal fluid is associated with a lower photoreceptor thickness, which we have recognized by AI to come with a loss in retinal function, and also patients that have a high volume of intraretinal fluid have a high photoreceptor loss. This is not true for subretinal fluid. However, damage to the overlying photoreceptors is also seen if the volume of the PED, like the subarachnoid, increases. What is AI providing in neovascular AMD? It provides a beautiful tool how with one mouse click you can just upload and then see what happens in the cloud, which is the perfect, which is then provided to you as a precise fluid activity meter, turning pixels into nanoliters in a reliable, objective, and quantitative manner. Such a report at one glance obviously significantly enhances workflow. It increases the precision of your personalized treatment, and it gives you a beautiful overview of the disease profile, like the biography of the disease in every single patient. It's very important to use AI tools, not only because they allow us to go from a subjective qualitative management to an objective quantitative one, significantly enhancing reliability and precision of the treatment. It is also a need for survival of eye doctors who need to manage the huge task of treating more than 200 million individuals with AMD. We did so elegantly, but always a little bit overworked at the level of neovascular AMD, looking at fluid. We will have to do this on the level of GA, which is a much higher dimension. This is a responsibility that we have to manage for the patient's sake, and we should equip with the best technology available. The effect of AI on treatment or prognosis consists of the use of fully automated and reliable AI-assisted analysis taken from routine OCT images. Such tools are accessible at any place and any time through the cloud and provide real-time results. They will reduce human errors by objective quantitative evaluation. and help us to define optimal treatment parameters based on fluid compartments and volumes and photoreceptor imaging. This will clearly introduce a paradigm shift in clinical trials and real-world practice and help us to reduce the overwhelming human resource strain and costs. I thank Apellis, my team at the Medical University of Vienna, and Retinal for allowing me to show these data. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you very much. Very encouraging results together with Tunde. And I think Konstantinos will also show us very encouraging results, which will show us the future of our retina clinics and ophthalmology clinics in general. Take it away, Konstantinos.
Thank you very much, Marion and Anat, for inviting me to take part in this very distinguished panel. There are so many themes that have been touched upon. One struggles to know where to start from. So I'll be giving a whistle-stop tour of some homegrown technologies, AI models, but also deployment models that we have been developing at the Moorfields Reading Center that touch upon many of the themes that have been mentioned in this in the preceding excellent talks. So, and I'll start with deployment. And deployment on a cloud-based system, as Ursula mentioned as well, is probably the optimal way of going about it. But we view it more as a continuum of providing services that range from telemedicine, teleophthalmology, that relies on expert human graders, expert human clinicians for interpreting images, moving on to AI-assisted interpretation, and then moving on, hopefully, soon to remote monitoring that will be at the patient's home and potentially even in the palm of their hands. So starting with telemedicine, which the core principle of teleophthalmology is the ability to transfer imaging from, let's say, primary care to secondary care to an expert center for advice and guidance, or for digital referral triaging. And in order to do that, we first had the idea of a centralized telemedicine digital triaging system that we established at the Moorfields Reading Center, which is very much aligned with Anat's suggestion that a centralized monitoring center is required to implement these technologies in a meaningful way in order to support the system and patients. In this pilot first implementation, we were able to reduce the number of unnecessary referrals that we were receiving from the community by 13%, and also to downgrade the level of urgency in 1/4 of cases. Or everything was referred as urgent, but not everything turned out to be urgent. And now how we went about it is, and I'll focus on deployment to begin with, we developed a cloud-based virtual private cloud AWS system, which allows easy upload of clinical data and imaging from primary care ophthalmology or community optometry, like is the case in the UK. And in this video, this is the view from the referrer side, whether it's an ophthalmologist or an optometrist, who can easily upload OCT files of any type, in this case, and refer them to a centralized digital triaging or advice and guidance center. So now moving on to the more important bit, which is the view from the triaging center, the centralized center. Here we can see that we have received the OCT that was referred, that was part of the referral from the community. The very tricky bit here is that we had to reverse engineer a lot of the proprietary file formats from Heidelberg, TopCon, size, etc., in order for them to be viewable directly on the platform, and so that they can be reviewed by human experts and a decision can be made quickly, without any delays, without having to upload the proprietary file formats to the proprietary software of its device manufacturer, which introduces a significant amount of delay and complexity. Now, the next step would be, I think, we should be able to move to the next slide. Maybe I will need some technical support to move to the next slide, but I think it's just repeating the same one here. Yeah. So here we have, again, an example of a referral of an OCT, a full volume file that can be viewed on the platform, as you can see, because it has been converted into an open source file format. And then we click on this little robot sign, and that then runs a live inference of an AI model that we have embedded, we have integrated on the cloud system. It runs the AI. It takes a relatively small amount of time, as you will see. And now it has run the segmentation, it has produced the segmentation overlays, and it has projected them on the OCT in real time, highlighting the areas of PED, subretinal fluid, subretinal hyperreflective material, and intraretinal fluid, which can be an assisting technology for example, community optometrists that don't have the skills to interpret the OCTs, but also for our better understanding of the natural history of the disease, the response to treatment. That pertains to wet AMD, to neovascular AMD in this instance. Again, we should try to move to the next slide. There we are. And of course, the unique advantage of this approach is quantification. As you can see, we can quantify these features to the level of microns. PED, subretinal fluid, intraretinal fluid, and retinal hyperreflective material, which has academic interest, but also a clinical potential application. We can move to the next slide. And now, focusing on geographic atrophy, as Ursula very nicely summarized in her presentation, geographic atrophy is now our new main focus of interest. And it is where AI will probably shine, because in neovascular AMD, we can eyeball, in a sense, the changes in fluid, in pathological features, and make management decisions. For geographic atrophy, this is going to be particularly challenging because it's a slowly progressing disease, and then quantification, accurate quantification and monitoring will be essential. So we developed the Gaia app, the Gaia AI model, which means Geographic Atrophy Intelligent Analytics. It also means Earth in Greek. And so this model, which is actually currently it's functional on Heidelberg OCTs, it segments every single B scan of a Heidelberg OCT volume for the three features that are determined by the CAM consensus definitions as required to define the presence of geographic atrophy, or RORA, as they like to use these a bit more esoteric terms. But what is the benefit of such a model? Well, first of all, it's time efficiency. So segmenting 49 B scans for three features each, and then taking the overlap of those to define the presence of geographic atrophy, and then taking all of these B scans and projecting them on the unfast corresponding unfast near-infrared image of the Heidelberg to produce a surface area of atrophy and of the individual constituent features. Is something that can be done uniquely at speed and at scale with the help of AI. Here you can see that it took our poor graders at the reading center 43 minutes to segment an entire volume, and it took 2.04 seconds for the AI model to do the same task. Now, the clinical utility is quite evident. As you can see in this example here, let's say there is a case of a patient with geographic atrophy. We apply here the compound model that combines the three constituent features defined by the CAM consensus, and it highlights the area of atrophy. It gives a quantification, how much the area of atrophy is. And then 6 months later, let's say, we apply the same model, we quantify the area of atrophy, and we can see how much it has grown. Here, it's a case without treatment, and we can have a percentage of change. You can see here the percentage is 38%, so this lesion grew very significantly. The clinical application is evident here because it will be impossible, especially with monthly treatments that are likely to be the case, at least for the treatments that are now licensed. It will be impossible to detect the subtle changes in the size of the surface area without automated, accurate, reliable, repeatable quantification. As Ursula mentioned, the Gaia app has, we are in discussions of getting it adopted by the Heidelberg Appway. So it's probably going to be the third app that will be available on the Appway. We did a demo of that in the recent ARVO conference. This is a bit small, but this is the type of PDF report that can be produced by the Gaia app, quantifying the constituent features of geographic atrophy and geographic atrophy itself, and quantify it and have that report available on the HiX software for everyone who has access to a Heidelberg device. So there's a prospect for global deployment, which will make a difference for Ursula's life. Ursula is one of our patients who gave an interview with me for Channel 4 News, but we will not go into the interview itself. And then moving a step further, there is the promise of remote monitoring. Anat has done some spectacular work on home OCT. I will talk a bit more about home vision monitoring. We used one of the FDA-approved and CE-marked home vision monitoring apps. It's a smartphone-based app, so it's a cheap technology. It can be available at scale. We performed the first deployment in real life at scale of this technology on more than 500 patients. And our emphasis was on understanding usability, how many of our patients can use these digital technologies, and how we can avoid the risk of excluding some of patients from benefiting from this digital revolution, while our intention is, of course, to expand access to care. You can see here that although very reassuringly and encouragingly, more than 60% of our patients, which are elderly patients with neovascular AMD, were able to make use of this technology. Around 40% were not able to use it. And of those who were able to use it, not everyone used it in a compliant way. These are very important variables, very important factors that we need to understand better. And what we did, we tried to understand which are the factors that influence can determine which patients are likely to be able to use these technologies, so uptake, and which patients are likely to use it in a compliant way. We found that increasing age has a negative correlation with the ability of patients to take up these digital technologies. Also, there was a positive association with visual acuity in the better seeing eye. Obviously, there is increased motivation for patients to maintain vision if there is one good eye that they have left. In terms of compliance, similarly, we found that patients with wet AMD were more compliant. There's no surprise there than patients with diabetic retinopathy. But there was also an association with white British ethnicity. Touching again on this theme of digital exclusion, are the factors that may favor some patients as opposed to others. We also did an AI type of analysis, which is less rigid than a statistical analysis, to understand which factors may play a role on our ability of our patients to benefit from these technologies. And we also found that the level of satisfaction that they experience, the level of reassurance, how comfortable they feel with the use of modern technologies, such as the internet, higher educational level, higher income levels, all of these factors play a role and make it more likely that patients may be able to benefit from these technologies. And the flip side is that we need to develop strategies to mitigate against risks for digital exclusion. We found extremely high levels of satisfaction and extremely high levels of reported ease of use with this technology. But there is probably some bias there because we are basing it on the patients who were able to use this technology and not the ones that were not. So I'm not bragging here, but we received an award as the best digital innovation of the year last year with the home vision monitoring initiative. And the most important element, again, is that we shone a spotlight on risks of digital exclusion, which can be demographic, clinical, and factors related to the perception. Another important point is that both home vision monitoring and home OCT will generate a wealth of granular data. Patients may be testing every day. And then that is where, again, AI can shine in making use of this data and help us gain greater insight into the natural history of these conditions, their behavior, and their likelihood for response to treatment. There are some barriers that we need to overcome. Digital exclusion that I mentioned, which is associated with poverty and social exclusion as well, and cost efficiency, which might be more relevant to more costly technologies like home OCT, although there is a lot of progress in making this more affordable now. Now, the eye hospital of the future should be, as I mentioned, I would summarize here, accessible, personalized, offering state-of-the-art quality of care, patient-centric, privacy-protecting, ethical, inclusive, and hopefully move care from the hospital, away from the hospital, closer to the community, into the homes of our patients, and even to the palm of their hands. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank the speakers very much for the excellent talks. I personally learned a lot, and I would like to ask Marion to help me with moderating the discussion. We have many, many questions, and we don't have a lot of time. We're actually over time, but we will spare some time for discussion. And I think that maybe I saw in the someone was asking. Well, actually, it's not so many questions in the discussion, Marion, unless I'm wrong. From the Q&A from we have some questions from Raoult here.
Yes. I think I've checked. So like there are really like two real questions.
Please go ahead. decide who
Yes.
answers them.
So one of them is whether there are any efforts to kind of harmonize the image standardization in order to overcome the hurdle that a lot of the OCT and the images we see and have are encrypted and can't be kind of downloaded in a raw data format, which is actually really a problem. And I mean, like colleagues from radiology never had these kind of problems because like all the data were DICOM or DICOM compatible, but we have it. And actually, there are efforts for that. There was just, I think, half a year ago, there was a National Eye Institute and FDA and ONC joint workshop on this problem, and it kind of tackled the problem and kind to solve or work on the problem to kind of establish ocular imaging standards. And actually all the large imaging device companies were there as well. However, it was still just a workshop, so there were no kind of laws established or anything. So I think we still have to cope with this problem. But more and more, I think the manufacturers and the device companies see the problem and kind of work towards that. And yeah, I don't know, Konstantinos, how is Moorfields dealing with it?
Thank you, Marion. Well, we probably, to some extent, gave up on waiting for the manufacturers to resolve it. Although there are efforts now that are being made that are much more serious. And as I mentioned, in our cloud-based platform, we have embedded scripts that convert all the proprietary file formats into open source file formats that can then be reconstructed and can be viewed on the platform easily, quickly. And they allow applying our AI models on them, because AI models can only be applied on open source file formats and not on the proprietary file formats. So it's a bit of reverse engineering, probably some very talented data scientists, they go a long way.
But that's the problem. So I have the experience, everything can be encrypted. So this is just a matter of, like you said, so everything can be encrypted. It's just a matter of course, if you have an algorithm which is kind of sold or is publicly used, you can't do it. I mean, this is the thing. And encrypting is fine. And of course, if the NIS allows that, that's fine. But otherwise, yeah, it's you're getting a bit, yeah, in a kind of grayish area. Anat, we didn't hear you. It's weird. It's yeah. It says you're unmuted, but you're actually muted. Maybe while you try to solve the problem, Tunde, anything else you want to add here?
I think the most important thing will be that we'll think about the benefits both for society and for the patient and the health system, because if we don't manage to marry these up, we'll struggle with uptake and use and also for those patients as well who can't use the system. So we have sort of like a moral responsibility as well for that.
But based on the presentation, I can definitely say, so England and Ireland is currently the place to be. So, and there was another question from the audience, whether these algorithms can be retrospectively used. So maybe Tunde or Konstantinos, do you want to take the question?
Sure, I can start. I mean, they can definitely be retrospectively used, and one of the primary use cases could potentially be for improving efficiency of recruitment to clinical trials, especially for geographic atrophy, where there are no structured data anywhere. So sites don't know how many patients they have with geographic atrophy, at least in the UK, because we never see these patients or hardly ever. But there will be patients in our databases, in our neurocity databases. So applying a model like Gaia, it can run through an entire database, a Heidelberg database, and identify eligible patients for a clinical trial and that can accelerate, the translational pipeline, reduce costs, and bring drugs to patients faster.
Yeah, actually, I agree. So we are actually using this right now in order to recruit patient, and it's a very, very nice way. Nonetheless, you still have to look then kind of through the cases. And like I said, sometimes you really also end up with false positives. So it's then again, it's very exciting. But when you try to put this into practice, still you end up with hurdles like who is then looking at the OCTs, because you just can't send it out to all the patients, because a lot of patients will come and they're kind of false positive patients. So there are still a lot of things you have to think about. But in general, it's working. Yes. Tunde, anything to add here?
No, I think you summarized it really well, and we'll need to be able to move with time. So this is going to come. AI will be here, whatever we do.
I think this is such a great last sentence. If the audience has one more questions or something, they should be very quick in writing, because our time has already elapsed.
It's a shame we cannot hear Anat.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Anat, you have to wave. So with that, on behalf of Anat and of all the speakers, thank you very much for this very exciting session. Thank you for being here tonight, and of course the audience who stayed with us instead of doing something else on this lovely summer evening. And thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing hopefully all of you at one of the next Euretina webinars. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Have a nice evening, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.